the president is once again threatening to send federal troops to American cities. But what do we really know about how troops or ICE officers or actually any kind of law enforcement in this day and age actually operates? My name is Emily Galvin Almanza. I'm a criminal defense attorney and author of the upcoming book, The Price of Mercy. And I want to tell you about police surveillance. So most Americans, when they think about police surveillance, are imagining something that is 15 to 20 years out of date. We're thinking of basic things like surveillance cameras or maybe, speeding cameras or the cameras that catch you if you run a red light, generally traffic-oriented things. We may also be thinking about forms of police officers going on internet forums and asking people questions or pretending to be a forum user and coaxing someone into engaging in some kind of criminal conspiracy. But the truth is, when we're talking about police data and surveillance, the kind of thing that powers massive federal or even state incursions into personal privacy, most of us have no idea what we're really talking about. So here's the skinny. Police surveillance technology at this point is massive. Obviously, most police departments and federal departments are sharing huge databases of DNA evidence, of people's prior arrests, of warrants that might be out for a given individual, of past arrests and criminal histories. All of that is to be expected. But in this day and age, they're also starting to branch out further. Any data broker that can sell its data for advertising purposes, for example, can also sell its data to police departments. So if you go, for example, to a massive police technology convention, you're going to find a lot of themes there, including the theme of purchasing data from private companies that are scraping the internet, that are scraping social media use. So when we talk about what kind of technology is being utilized, it's far beyond these databases. It's actually amalgamations of things that people might be scraping off of the internet or off of other technologies and selling for private use like advertisement or for law enforcement use. Now, that may sound like something you want, right? Like, okay, we want law enforcement keeping everybody safe, keeping an eye on things. A lot of things seem to be brewing on the internet and then coming off the internet into real life. I get that, but I'm not necessarily talking about just that. I'm talking about companies that can scrape massive amounts of internet data and also massive amounts of data from technology we have in our homes. Anybody have smart appliances? Anybody have a system in your house that works as both kind of like an intercom and little camera? Maybe you have it trained on your kid's room. Maybe you just have a system you can talk to, like an Alexa device or a Siri or any of the other assistants that you talk to, and they respond back. How do they respond back? Because they're listening. Obviously, many of these private companies have overtly stated that they will take protective measures with private data, like they would only hand it over if they are served with a proper subpoena. In other words, an order from a judge saying, hey, you've got to hand over the recordings you have or the data you have from the home of such and such a person. But when we look at the world changing as fast as it is changing, and we look at investigations being launched that seem to be overtly political and personal, such as when a few days ago, the president posted what seems to be a private message to the attorney general, directing her to prosecute a specific list of people, and then she moved forward. And actually now we see charges against those people. When we look at an apparatus that doesn't seem to be based on credible fears of real crime, but rather on political ideology, retribution, and the engineering of future political power, you have to start to ask yourself, is this technology keeping you safer, or could it be used for a more dangerous purpose? It's a really important question because most of the time when we give permission to police to use certain forms of technology, when a community votes, okay, we're going to use a thing called ShotSpotter that is going to call the police every time a loud bang happens in the neighborhood, and that way if a gun goes off, police will automatically be alerted. Most people are thinking about that with the most pro-safety case scenario in mind, right? That a real crime would happen and that this technology would alert the authorities and that they would show up faster and they would have better evidence to prevent that kind of thing from happening again in the future. This is a massive misconception. First of all, a ton of the technology that police are relying on these days is deeply flawed. ShotSpotter, for example, the one I just told you about, that calls the police when a loud bang happens in a neighborhood. You know what also makes loud bangs besides guns? Cars backfiring, dumpsters being slammed. And when the police come because a technology has told them there might have been a gun fired, they're not coming in the calmest frame of mind. They're showing up with the level of force and agitation that you would expect from possibly an active shooter. Which means that if you have a group of kids setting off small fireworks in an alley, the type of police response those kids get is dangerous, perhaps most to those kids, but also dangerous for everyone involved. When we look at facial recognition technology, it's about what you would expect. Sometimes that technology is good at identifying faces, but for large groups of people, particularly for people with darker skin tones, that technology does a pretty iffy job of accurately identifying a person. So in a world where we already have concerns about AI manipulation of evidence and the capacity of new technologies to fabricate evidence, and we also have a set of technologies like facial recognition or ShotSpotter or predictive policing technologies, which analyze certain massive data sets and try to minority report style predict where crime is going to happen, we have the potential for a world in which we believe our technology is accurate. We believe that these mechanisms are working, but in fact, they're reflecting our existing biases, they're inaccurate, they're manipulable, and worst of all, they're creating the kind of dragnet that, under a certain kind of administration, can be used to target political opponents. In other words, most people think of surveillance as a thing that's going to catch other people doing crimes. They don't think of what happens when we've permitted our society to utilize mass surveillance, and it becomes something that catches people doing things that were not previously crimes, that might previously have been considered free speech, or political activism, or peaceful protest. So in general, when we approach the question of what investigatory tactics we're allowing law enforcement to use, we are now in a place where looking at things like that quasi-DM, quasi-truth social post, or looking at things like the seeming targeting of high-profile political actors for political ends to threaten them through the use of the criminal legal system, we have to ask ourselves, what have we allowed? And will we continue to allow it? Because after all, most of the utilization of this technology is happening very quietly, but it's not something that the public absolutely could not get access to. Most people just don't go to their county board of supervisors meeting when the next round of police technology is going to be discussed. They don't go to their civilian oversight board meeting where police use of technology and force might be discussed. They don't file a freedom of information request to find out what their police department is actually utilizing to surveil the community. Most people haven't thought they needed to. But as a citizenry, these are tactics that are available. And as a citizenry who may wish to be more informed, in an age when this technology could result in a world we've only previously envisioned in scary movies, it may be time to become more engaged. My name is Emily Galvin Almanza. You can find me on the 5-Minute News YouTube channel and podcast. You can also find me on Twitter @Galvin Almanza or at emilygalvinalmanza.com.